All right, welcome to the February 27th Chaska City City Council meeting. And the mayor is out of town this evening, so I'll be sitting in for him. So we'll do the call to order first.
Recording in progress.
I jumped the gun. Should I start over?
I think you're good.
I think
Okay.
it's on air, so I
Yeah.
think you're good.
Okay, sounds good. So with that, we'll call to order.
Oh, I think we do
Oh,
want
do
to
a
do
pledge
the
of allegiance
pledge.
first, then we'll do a roll. Okay, so do a pledge of allegiance.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so Elise, roll call.
Councilmember Hatfield?
Here.
Councilmember Hubbard?
Here.
Councilmember Wong?
Here.
Councilmember Grah?
Here.
Mayor Winchell?
All right, so he's not present. So has everyone had a chance to review the agenda for this evening?
Yes. I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion by Hubbard, second by Hatfield. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So now's the time in the agenda for the visitor presentation. Is there anyone who would like to speak on behalf of something that's not already on the agenda? Okay. So with that, then we'll move to the next item of the agenda, which is to approve the previous city council meeting minutes.
Let me just double check, there's no one online.
Oh, is there anyone online? Kevin?
There is, Pat, are you here for a visitor presentation? No, I think you're okay to proceed.
Sounds good. Then we'll move on to the next item, which is the previous meeting minutes. So has everyone had a chance to review the council meeting minutes from February 6th?
I'd move to approve the minutes.
Second?
All right, so motion by Grah, second by Hubbard. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So consent, we have quite a number of items on the consent agenda, but has everyone has a chance to review the items on the consent agenda? We can always pull something off if something that we have a question about or requires further discussion.
Motion to approve consent.
Motion by Hatfield,
Second.
second by Grah. Any further discussion?
Just one thing I'll just mention on item H, which is the underpass and recreational trail permit agreement. So the good news is that we have met with the county, and that they consider that a destination trail, and so that's 100% covered by the county, which is great. What we've talked about with them is they don't have it in their budget for the 2024 year when we would actually want to build it. So we've talked about sort of pre-funding it as part of our overall 41 and 61 project to get it done, and then they'd reimburse us through that. So I guess the good news is that we've found a way to make sure that we include that as part of the overall 41 construction project.
Excellent.
Great.
Great news. So the county will pick up that later, at a later date. then.
Yeah, and probably not that much later, probably the next
Next
year.
fiscal year. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Very cool. All right, so we had a motion and a second, correct? So, any other discussions or items on it? Then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries for consent. All right, sir, two action items. First one is a public hearing for certification of spring delinquent utilities. All right.
All right, Mayor and council members, one of the things that we do now actually on, we used to do it just once a year, but now we do it on a quarterly basis so that it doesn't get too far behind, is to certify any delinquent utility fees that we have so that that are more than 90 days delinquent, so that we're able to assess those if they don't eventually get paid off. So we can't actually assess those until the end of the year, so people have the opportunity during the year to be able to pay those off. They actually wouldn't go on until the 2024 tax year, but it puts them on notice that if they don't catch up with their utility payments, that they that we would have the right to be able to assess those. Now, with that being said, one of the things that we do with all of these with all of these utility bills is, we come up with payment plans all the time. And so we always tell people if situations pop up or whatever, that we will put a payment plan in place for you to get back in line. A lot of times, once it gets to the point with us having to actually certify these as delinquent and move forward to assess them, is when we're not getting any response from people on that. So we will continue to make that an option for them to be able to do that. But again, we try to do this now on a quarterly basis so that it doesn't add up so much over the year without people being aware until the end of the year when it could be very big. So, with that being said, if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, this is a public hearing, so we would have to take any public comments.
So we'll open that in a minute here, so
Yep.
I'll give a council an opportunity to ask questions. Any questions for Matt? All right, so that said, we'll open it up as a public hearing at 7:06 PM. Does anyone from the public like to speak on this item? And online, was there anyone who'd like to speak on the item? Kevin?
Nope, there's no one online.
All right. So, seeing as there's no one's chosen to approach the podium, then we'll close the public hearing at, let's say, 7:07 here. We got 15 seconds, but we'll call it 7:07.
My computer says 7:07 already.
Okay, sounds good. I'll go with that. All right, so we'll close the public hearing. So any other discussion we'd like to have on this item? It's a routine thing that we do every quarter, actually.
It's overall just a question of health of a city. That's the word I want to use. Similar numbers, less, more than we typically see. I'm just trying to recall from.
No, this is pretty typical. I mean, when you consider how much we actually collect in utility bills over the course of this amount of time, it's actually a pretty small amount in the grand scheme of things. I mean, you have to remember that, just our electric utility alone, has a budget of $30 million. And so when you look at all of our utilities totaling the 12,000, it's really a pretty small number that we have. So it does happen, obviously, but it's not a huge percentage of what we see.
Okay, just curious.
The other thing I'll point out too is that, from a business perspective, I would say the people that we deal with on a business perspective are pretty small in number, and they tend to be the same ones from time to time. So, when you talk about the health of sort of the business community, in years, I haven't seen that list change with the ones that we have to deal with on a regular basis. It's pretty much the same from month to month.
So it's just the way that they choose to do business for whatever reason.
Yeah, or, I mean, it can be a cash flow issue for them. It can be a number of different things. But, in a lot of those cases, we have payment plans in place, and it's, so they might, and somebody might have delinquencies that are out there, but we always tell them, let's just get you on a reasonable payment plan, because I think some people sort of say, well, geez, I'm so far behind, I'm just opening up a can of worms if I try and go and get this resolved. But if we can come up with a reasonable payment plan that stretches over a time period so that they can get caught up, our hope is that becomes a relief to them, so it's just not hanging over them.
Yeah, because, I mean, the last thing we want is we don't want any of our businesses or members of the community to be suffering unduly because of the utility bills, right?
Yep, and at the same time, it's making sure that we're fair and equitable with the people who are paying their utility bills too. Making sure that, that everybody, who is paying feels that we're being responsible on that side of it too, so.
Sure. So anything else? Anyone care to make a motion?
I make a motion to, sorry, the thing escaped me here. I make a motion to approve the resolution 2023-17, the spring 2023 delinquent utilities.
So motion by Councilmember Hubbard,
Second.
second by Hatfield. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, so that takes us to the approval to move forward with the Phase 2 Professional Services Agreement for facility naming rights and sponsorship.
Mayor Pro Tem and Council, the item in front of you tonight is one that's coming both from the Park Board and then also from a joint planning or work session that we had a little over a month ago, talking about sort of a second phase of looking at the potential for facility naming rights and sponsorships within the city of Chaska. Marshall Grange, our Park and Rec Director, is here to go through a presentation, sort of talk about where we've been with this, what we're sort of looking at, talk about what a Phase 2 assessment would be, what it is and what it isn't, and sort of talk about, you know, what would be sort of the timeline also of what we could expect as far as getting results back in that. So I will turn it over to Marshall, and he can go through his presentation.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Council. I'll just go ahead and share my screen here to pull up the presentation. All right. So just kind of an outline to frame our discussion tonight. First off, we'll talk a little bit about the process leading up to this point and what was really kind of included in Phase 1, which was the valuation report that we've had some discussion about. And then from there, I'll talk about, you know, if we were to pursue naming rights, what we would use that revenue for, discuss what the Phase 2 timeline and deliverables would be, and then talk about next steps, and then turn it over to see what questions you have from there. Okay, so our discussion on naming rights and sponsorship actually started back in May of 2021. We held work sessions with both the Parks and Recreation Commission and the City Council. You know, and the goal of those was to really kind of introduce the idea of this. We shared examples of other metro municipalities that have pursued this, and really just wanted to get a sense of whether or not there was the interest in pursuing this further. Coming out of that, there was interest. So from there, staff put together a request for proposal. We sent that out directly to 6 different consulting firms, and then also made it available on our website. We ended up getting 3 proposals back, and we narrowed it down to 2 to interview. Went through that process, and then ultimately came back with a recommendation to work with the Superlative Group. So from there, we worked with our city attorneys and the Superlative Group to put together an agreement, and it was back on February 7th of 2022 that City Council authorized staff to move forward with that agreement. And that agreement really included 3 different phases as part of the kind of the workflow, so to speak. Phase 1 was conducting an asset inventory and then putting together a valuation summary for those particular assets. Phase 2 is meeting with potential partners and having agreement negotiations, which is what we're considering moving forward with tonight. And then Phase 3 would be the activation of the agreements and then follow-up solicitation. So once the agreement was in place, staff began work with the Superlative Group on Phase 1 back in March of 2022. The Superlative Group staff came into Chaska, and we toured them around all of the facilities, for an entire afternoon and then had several meetings, just going back and forth, providing them information so that they could conduct their analysis. And that agreement, or that draft of the valuation report was completed back on August 19th of 2022. And as part of that evaluation, we ended up having the superlative group look at the Curling and Event Center, the Community Center, the Chaska Town Course, Athletic Park, our trail system, along with some of our larger community events like Fire and Ice. And the intent of doing that was really to kind of understand what the opportunity was, what the value of those different facilities and events are, and kind of get an understanding of how they compare to one another, and generally understand if there was anything in there that we felt was worth pursuing further. And I think it's important to note, leading up until now, we have worked with some local businesses for sponsoring some of our community events that you may have seen, but up to this point, we really have not done any type of what I would say larger scale sponsorships or advertising within any of our facilities. So we're kind of starting out with a blank slate, which is why we wanted to work with a consultant and be very methodological in how we're pursuing this. And if we were going to do this, you know, sort of starting with the big picture stuff first and maximizing the revenue potential with naming rights, you know, and then kind of infilling that in with more of the in-facility sponsorship opportunities. So, and since we've gotten that report back, we've conducted a couple more joint work sessions. So we held one back in October of last year with the Park and Rec Commission and City Council, and then again just earlier in the year back in January, where we reviewed the results of that valuation summary. And it was there where staff really recommended that we should pursue looking further into the opportunity that exists with the Curling and Event Center. It was kind of apparent based in that valuation report that the Curling and Event Center does have the most potential for value as it relates to naming rights and sponsorship revenue. The Curling and Event Center is approaching 10 years old, and with the goal of that facility being to attract people into our downtown, we feel that these additional resources can help reinvest back into this facility so it can maintain its world-class recognition and continue to be that great catalyst driving activity into our downtown area. So the two priorities that we see if we were to do this and be successful in getting naming rights for the Curling and Event Center, we see these revenues funding our capital asset management program. So making sure we're maintaining the replacement of large capital items within the facility. And then secondarily, we would also pursue the funding of an expansion of the Players Lounge on the south end of the building there, which I got another slide to talk about that. So as it relates to our capital asset management program, you know, as we sit today and as we've evaluated what it takes to keep up with the capital replacement at that facility, it amounts to about an annual amortization of $77,000 a year, which up to this point, we haven't necessarily funded that. And then as we're looking out over the next 5 years, and like I said, we're approaching that 10-year mark, where a lot of larger capital starts to reach its life expectancy, we have an upcoming liability of about $450,000 in large capital to replace. So we feel like the naming rights revenue can be a resource that can help support that ongoing replacement of capital over time. And then just a note there too on the bottom, when the facility was built, a portion of the current community fund allocation that is used to pay off the debt service will go towards the significant structural and mechanical assets that will need to be replaced sometime after the debt service is paid off. So those real large items that have more of that 20, 25-year life expectancy, large mechanical roof replacement, things of that nature have always been accounted for to be replaced through that community fund once the debt service is paid off in the future. And then the second area where we see the potential for naming rights revenue would be the expansion of the Players Lounge. And so since the existence of this facility, it's become very apparent that is one area that was maybe a miss in the design, and especially as we're wanting to host large bonspiels and curling events. You know, we're just not able to do that effectively and efficiently and create that sort of true club atmosphere with what currently exists today. So the 292 design group had come up with some thoughts on what an expansion could look like, which would kind of essentially mirror a little bit of the experience that exists within the Crooked Pint, where there's glass overlooking all 6 sheets, but on the opposite end, that would be a little bit more curtailed specifically for the curling members. And it also, I think, would be very advantageous as we continue to be very successful with our corporate Learn to Curl activity that occurs throughout the year, along with also trying to grow our juniors program at the facility. So looking ahead at what would be included as part of a phase 2 in working with the superlative group, I think it's important to note that what this is really doing is taking that next step to see does what the report they came back with in the value that they've estimated actually hold true out in the market. So to take that next step and start to have some discussions with organizations to see, A, is there interest, and then B, is it at the appropriate dollar amount that the superlative group valuated it at. In one thing with the superlative group, and a big reason why we've selected them as a consultant, is they actually have a lot of experience with projects here in the state of Minnesota. So they've worked in the past with the city of Woodbury and their community center being the Health East Community Center. They've worked with the St. Paul Saints in securing CHS Field. They've worked with Minnesota United in the Allianz Field. They've done some work with the Minneapolis Convention Center and are currently under contract with the Minnesota Orchestra. So throughout those projects, they've developed a lot of relationships with businesses in the Minnesota and Midwest area that we'll be able to leverage as part of this phase 2. And so the first step kind of in the beginning would be the development of kind of the sales materials and what I would say is kind of our story to tell at the Curling and Event Center in preparation of then reaching out to companies and having those discussions. And so that would include, you know, both local businesses and looking at Minnesota and regional business as well, to maximize the potential as we think about naming rights. From there, with any interest, it would then result in site visits and having further discussions with those businesses. And then throughout that process, the superlative group would be working with staff and providing monthly reports on, you know, what they're learning and what they're gathering from those conversations with local businesses. And then should it go from there, it would result in working towards an agreement. And there again, another thing to note here is any agreements going forward would always be approved by City Council. So just thinking about phase 2 doesn't mean that the superlative group is going to go and just strike up these deals and draft up agreements without any staff or City Council approval. That would all be needed to be done to move forward with any type of agreement. So next steps tonight, again, we're just having discussion about the moving forward with phase 2. This was discussed at the Parks and Rec Commission at their last meeting on February 13th. And they did make a motion with a unanimous approval recommending that City Council authorize staff to move into phase 2 with the superlative group. Should that decision be made tonight, the superlative group would then receive $3,000 a month in retainer fees going forward. And phase 2 typically takes about 6 to 12 months as part of that process. And then I noted here too, community input. So as we understand what the interest is out there and the specific dollar amount, we would make sure as staff to conduct community engagement and gather feedback to see where the community feels about this before we would bring that recommendation back to City Council for any formal agreement going forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to see what questions or anything else you would like to discuss.
Any questions?
I don't have any questions. I just look at this to continue as a conversation of creative ways to continue to keep that a world-class facility. You know, there's examples, we just went through a process as a council this last year of what happens when we don't plan for reinvestment and bills come due and facilities come due. And so I think it is a unique opportunity to be creative in non-tax dollar ways of doing it. I'll say it that way. You know, I've myself personally have come to accept that every, you know, logos on NBA jerseys were like, whoa, what are we doing? And now they're, you know, everywhere, right? So there's always that initial, like, that seems weird. And then it just becomes kind of, in my opinion, only speaking for myself, it becomes a little bit of a second nature, like, yeah, that makes sense. And, you know, I especially look at this, I think users of that facility see the promise of like, hey, here's some, keep it world class, expand it. If those who are not users of facilities, their argument is probably like, well, good, I don't have my tax dollars paying for something I don't really use, right? So to me, it's a little bit of a good opportunity. Again, all things we've talked about through our meetings, you know, depends on the names that come to the table, do they align with the city values, all of that type of stuff still is important. And, but I also understand that, you know, we're gonna make that final say, and we could come back in phase 2 and say, here's the values, they were lower than we expected, and here's the names, and we're not a big fan of them, and then we don't do anything, potentially. Now, personally, again, I hope that doesn't happen. But I just think it's a good opportunity, within reason, and then I've expressed previously that I hope, you know, we'll continue to look for small businesses in the city of Chaska who probably can't put that financial commitment to it, but, you know, boards and the hockey rinks and outfield fencing and stuff like that, I think is a good, local, opportunity, which to me also says, you know, small town, right? You know, small town hockey rinks and baseball fields, and, you know, it's Joe's Lawn and Equipment Service, you know, in the outfield type of thing, so I think that's a cool thing too, so. That's all I got.
Anyone else? So,
I mean, I had the opportunity to speak independently with Marshall and Matt in regards to this. I know, I also can only speak for myself, but I may be the one person that sits up here that might be the most, not on board with this, or reserved, I guess you could say, in this, decision. If we do decide to go this route, I'm listening. Like I always said, I'm always willing to listen and walk along the process. And I think as we explore this, I think the process in which we're doing the exploration and the research is done really well. I support it. I support as we walk through this and see what results are garnered. I am very happy to know that we will be getting community input. I think that's a key essential in regards to making this decision, just because you know, the facilities were built publicly, and there's the public nature of that, and you know, you stick a company name on the top of that, and there's an optic there. There's a, you know, perception. And I want to make sure that if we do end up going this route, that we have done our due diligence in that decision. I know that as I sit up here in this position, that it's not about me and my personal feelings. It's about, you know, strategically what's best for the community and the community members. And I think that's just kind of where I carry it, is to see what the community wants, where they want to be with this, what's important. It may be different than how I personally feel about it. And I know that I come at it from maybe a little bit of a different viewpoint, in the sense that brand identity is really important, and it's important for a city too. You know, we're not a business, but we're an entity, and it's important for that. And it's hard to build, and can be hard to maintain, and it's fragile. And once it's gone, you know, what happens? And we need to look at all of that. And I'm not saying that we're not. We are. Like I said, we're doing a really good job of making sure that we're doing everything research-wise to go about it in the best ways. I just always like to put myself out there on record, that I'm listening, but, you know, I might be maybe the one person up here that's, I don't know, not 100% on board with it at this particular moment.
I appreciate your honesty.
I mean, it would be really easy for me to go with the flow, right? And be like, yeah,
Oh, it's
let's
good. It's
do
good to have
this,
it.
you know?
That's why we're up here, having
but-
different voices.
It's the one thing I really like about the superlative process that they have, is it allows us to sort of go through and explore these things without really jumping to a commitment, and really sort of understanding the ramifications, both the positive and the negative of it, before making a decision. So I I give a lot of credit to, well, Marshall's team for how they've been proceeding forward, just real I'm not gonna make the same mistake you did. I can't say the word methodically. But also the superlative group understanding, and I think part of it is because they've worked with other municipalities and understand some of the things that people get most concerned about, the understanding that this is a process, and we all have to feel comfortable and understand that before moving forward. So, yeah, I mean, I think the one good thing about doing the public engagement process after we have some more answers is that we can really provide specifics to our residents, to not just say, well, it could be this or it could be that, but to say, if it was going to be something, this is specifically what it would be, this is what the expectations would be, this is
Here's
what,
the real dollar.
here's the real dollar of what we get, here's what we give up, you know, all those different things so that people can understand not just the abstract, but something that's real.
Yeah.
So I do think that that's going to help in the public engagement process, be something that people can really respond to, because it's not abstract.
Right. You know, I have questions that are more detailed. That's not the moment in time to be hashing all of those out, but I will send those on, so.
Yeah, and for anyone who's watching this, you know, but this isn't, we've had multiple like work sessions to talk about this. We also met with Park Board too and had conversations with Park Board over public meetings as well. So, you know, we've been talking about this, asking a lot of questions throughout this journey. And it's been kind of a journey for like a year now.
2 years.
For 2 years now,
Yeah.
yeah. It's been a while, so.
Oh.
But, you know, always, you know, certainly welcome input. With that, is there anyone who'd want to speak or add anything for the public, you know, regarding this? Oh, is anyone online, Kevin?
Nope, there's no one online.
Okay. And then so,
Sometimes think, is he sleeping back there?
Kevin, you know anything or?
Nope.
Okay, and then I'll just, you know, my 2 cents are that, you know, probably one of the most important things for us as a council is to be good stewards of you know, public taxpayer dollars, right? And to me, one of the things that, you know, we struggle with in this day and age is that as many of the opportunities for revenue or funding from the state or federal or whatever kind of start like being taken away from us for different reasons, you know, politically, or, you know, however, they just vanish for, you know, whatever reason. For us to be able to come up with new revenue sources that are creative and also don't impact our, you know, our citizens from a tax base is really, really important. And this is a great way to do that, and to not, to basically allow this to be a standalone financially standalone facility, right? That basically is self-sufficient, operates on its own as a business, and taxpayers can be proud of the fact that we do that, and, you know, that we don't have to like pitch in the pot to keep it running, but it's something that everyone can use and enjoy. And that's something that's a real big feather in our hat, to be able to be at that point where knowing that operationally it's a standalone business. But at that same token, we also have a responsibility to all of our citizens and to all the members of our community, people who live here as well as businesses, that this is our name and our branding, that the city of Chaska owns this facility. So we have an inherent responsibility to ensure that whomever we choose to partner with is the right partner, that it will not tarnish the brand and the name of Chaska. So it's not something we take lightly, and, you know, as Councilmember Grau mentioned, we could come up with a bunch of candidates out here who are just throwing money at us, but you know what, if it's not the right one, we should say no, because it needs to be someone that we feel that represents our values, our community, and will represent our name well, because ultimately this is our name that's on this building, and sometimes there's things that's more important than money. So we need to take those things in balance. So that's my 2 cents, but in the big scheme of things, I think this is the right thing to do, to continue moving forward, to explore those options, and to allow Superlative to help us bring some potential partners to the table and have those conversations. So with that, that's all.
You know, the only other thing I'll mention is, you know, because this is like a 6 to 12 month process, we'll make a point of periodically getting sort of an update that we can provide in a bi-weekly report that sort of say, here's where we're at in the process, if there's been any interest, things like that, so that you guys are sort of kept up to date and the public's kept up to date with sort of where we're at.
Sounds great. All right, with that, does anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to, where did I go? I just clicked on the wrong thing. To approve moving forward with phase 2 of the professional services agreement for the facility naming rights and sponsorship.
Sounds good. Make the motion by Councilmember Hatfield.
Second.
Sounds second by Grau. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, so that brings us to bills, the most exciting thing of the evening. Anyone have any questions on bills? I got 3 questions here. So on page 5 of bills, under Becker Arena Products, we have a Arena 2 floor 50% off, so presumably it's for Arena 2, but,
And the floor.
and the floor.
Yeah.
Something related to the floor, 50% of something, but I don't know
Yeah,
what.
so this is part of our capital improvement reinvestment back into the community center facility this year. We talked a little bit about during the budget process that the rubber flooring in the Arena 2 is peeling up, and it's causing some pretty big tripping hazards for people in skates, which is why the
Oh, I know.
why the rubber floor is there
Oh,
to
yeah.
begin with. So
I was pushing on one of those little spots the other day when
Yeah.
I was over there.
Yeah, so it's basically
Pops back
replacing
up.
that. So we pay 50% up front, and then once it gets all installed, then we pay the other 50%.
Okay,
Same product or different product going in there?
Marshall, you could probably answer that better.
Different, it's
Different?
a different product, yeah.
Some advancement in floor technology,
Yeah,
I'm sure.
adhesive and all that,
Okay.
yep.
how old was the other flooring? It's been around for
That
a
was
while.
probably original.
Original.
Oh, so
Yeah,
it's
we,
like-
we redid the ice rink back in 2015, but we did not touch the floor at that time. So that would have been added on in 96,
Ooh.
probably 96.
Wow, so that
Yeah,
means
a
like
long time
almost like
ago.
25-year-old flooring.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess it's
It's
done pretty well for 25 years.
got our money's worth out of it. So, good. Okay, so page 9, we have an item from Quest, which is the 3-year enterprise license. What is the license for?
So it's, I'm gonna read this, because this is, the technical ones I'm always gonna read because I wanna make sure that I say it right. So it's the city's Meraki Wi-Fi system. So it includes we have to have a license for each of our Wi-Fi access points throughout our buildings. And so, for the access points, the switches and the routers. So this is basically the cost to license all of our devices for 3 years.
Okay, so this is the device management system.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
got it. And then page 33, I have one from Travelers Indemnity Company for boiler and machinery stuff from 2003, but it doesn't say what.
Yeah, it's our premium.
Is our
So we
premium.
have separate boiler and machinery equipment insurance, and specifically, one of the big items that we have in there is our gas turbine, which is down by the sugar plant, the electric generation
Oh.
facility.
Okay.
With that, we actually get reimbursed each year from the Minnesota Municipal Power Agency, both for the cost of the debt service on that, but also the cost of operating it, one of which is the insurance. So we do actually get a payment from MMPA each year to basically reimburse us for those. It's not the only piece of it, but it's certainly the largest piece, because that's a $26 million piece of equipment. But we do have other boiler and machinery stuff throughout other buildings, but not as large as that.
So we kind of roll them together. And
Mhm.
then,
Yep, we roll them all together because it's a separate insurance company that deals with boiler and machinery like that than it is for like property and liability.
okay, yeah, it's not dissimilar from like commercial aviation, because like if you like fly in like a airplane, like a 757 or 777 or whatever, the airlines actually lease the airplane separately from the engines, right? And so it's the same kind of thing, because the engines, or the turbines in this case, are a high value asset.
Yep, yep, and they also have specialty in being able to inspect them, and
Absolutely.
so that, yeah, I mean, as part of it, they have to inspect them, we have to provide inspection records, so it's just a very different animal than the rest of our property and liability insurance.
Yep, absolutely, makes sense. Yeah, that's all I've got. Anybody else? All right, so roll call?
Do you want a motion?
So we need a motion, sorry.
I make a motion to approve the bills.
Second.
So motion by Hubbard, second by Hatfield. Any further discussion? At least we do the honors.
Councilmember Hatfield?
Yes.
Councilmember Howard?
Yes.
Councilmember McGrath?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem
Aye.
Wong?
All right, motion carries. So that brings us to other business. Councilmember Hatfield.
Yes. Highway 41 open house next Thursday on March 9th from 5 to 7 at the Chaska Event Center. So that's for anyone to come and learn more about what's happening and the schedule and when they can expect to see things and how to move around downtown over the next several months. So that's coming up. And then there's also a business meeting for Highway 41, March 2nd, so this Thursday, at 6 PM here. Is it in this room? In this room. So highly encourage businesses to come to that. We had businesses attend our Downtown Alliance meeting last month, or this month, early February. And I think it was a good discussion and good for businesses to kind of get more of the details. So highly encourage any businesses to attend that. And then kind of a fun event that I saw on Facebook and I thought I'd mention, Carver County Libraries is doing a how to map with Carver County data, an introduction to GIS, on Saturday. I thought that was kind of fun. So it's in person or on Facebook at the Chanhassen Library. I think it was at 10:30. So kind of fun to get to learn about maps and all the data and you can do amazing things with data and maps. So I thought that was a fun one.
So Councilmember Hatfield, for the monthly meetings for Highway 41, if a business has questions or has input for the group, is that also an appropriate forum to bring that?
Yes, yep, Yep, so, and those are happening the second Fridays of every month, at 7:30, also here, right? We're here going forward? So that is also an option, yes.
And then as things pop up, we have our people through Bolton and Mink and that are available to be able to answer questions also. Elise has been doing a bang-up job, keeping in contact with the businesses about, making sure as issues arise that she's making sure she's giving a lot of attention to it. I know it's been super time-consuming for her, but she's done a very good job with it, so.
Yes, thank you, you have, I've witnessed that firsthand.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I have is just that's Employee Appreciation Week. Well, technically Employee Appreciation Day is Friday, but many treat it as the whole week. So I just want to give a shout out to the whole city staff and say thank you and I appreciate you and all you do. So that's it.
And with that, it's our Employee Appreciation Breakfast next Tuesday.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
So we have that coming up too.
Thanks.
that's it. Nope.
Councilmember Hubbard.
Couple things, I guess. First, the Communities of Belonging, the Chaska chapter of it, had their three-part series in conjunction with the YMCA, kind of the theme around, building, telling Chaska's story. And I know Councilmember Wong, you were able to participate in the last two discussions, great discussions in all three series. A lot of the same community members in each meeting, but then also different ones over the three meetings. And they had both large group discussion and also smaller group discussions. So a lot of thought-provoking questions and the Chaska chapter is going to be meeting here in March at some point here to kind of do like a wrap-up and kind of next steps and everything like that. I think they're just trying to, now with some of the attendance of that meeting, trying to kind of let that be like a base for growth, for participation and engagement in regards to that group, so.
And then,
Go ahead.
and it sounds like there's continuing the Weaving the Social Fabric, which is also continuing on March 6th, 7th, and 9th, right?
Yes, sure.
So I
I'm
hear.
not sure, but yeah, I will, yes.
Those are the living room discussions.
The
Yes,
living room
they're,
discussions, right.
oh, that's right,
That's
yeah, that's a
Pat-
different
Pat
entity,
Steig
a little
facilities.
bit.
Part of the same group, though,
It,
sort of. It's
no,
not
the
different series.
facilitation is different.
Different, yeah.
Those are actually, if you guys ever have an opportunity to jump in on one of those, it's a really nice discussion. And usually, I mean, all the ones I've ever done are facilitated by Pat Steig, and he does such a nice job facilitating those. So, great discussion. A little bit different than communities of belonging, though. It's more based on a particular topic. So there's that, and then she mentioned the Highway 41 open house, that was the other thing. I guess personal last thing is my son turned 8 yesterday, so happy birthday to Ethan. We had a great time celebrating his birthday this weekend. And that's it.
The hedgehog cake.
No, Thomas. We were back, we're having a Thomas the Train Renaissance here in our house, so I love every minute of it, because if you ask me of the 150 characters who they are, I know about 99% of them with him, so.
I found over
That's
the
where
last
my
couple-
trivia comes in real
Huh?
good, so.
I found over the last couple of weeks that there's actually an American version of Thomas the Train Engine 2. I thought they were all English versions.
No.
Yeah, I'm like,
They're voiced by different actors and everything.
yeah, I was like, wow, this is different.
Yep. Oh, you should sit down and have a discussion. My son will tell you all the ins and outs of everything, fan theories and everything. But happy birthday, Ethan. That's it.
All right. Councilmember Brown.
I noticed that the median outside the Carlin Center got struck again.
Yep.
I mean, so I guess that's all. I mean, again, it's like last time. We don't. It's the counties.
Yeah,
No.
although I will say that they probably aren't gonna do a whole lot with it, because that's part of what gets torn up in the whole reconstruction project.
Yeah.
So they're probably gonna leave it until they deal with that.
Is it? I don't mind. I want to ask a question. I was going to ask why we think that's happening, but that's a whole can of worms of the human.
Well,
environment.
I honestly,
The environment of why someone runs into something that's not moving, but
I honestly think it's too because of the design of that intersection. So my hope is that when that intersection is completely redone, that some of those design issues, I mean, I see it every day, because that's the way I drive home from work on Pine Street to there. And the semi's taking that corner, it's nuts. I mean, it does not surprise me that happens. So, you know, that's sort of the benefit of seeing a little bit more redesign coming.
okay. I don't want to take for granted, and I know no one else here took for granted. I'm not implying that, but sometimes people do such a good job at their job that sometimes we forget to thank them. So I'll just, you know, it's in here, and you're noticing about the storm and snow removal, because again, you go down some different cities that remain nameless, and you're just like, as the plow goes by, and plow comes by, I hear it, my camera and I says I had motion in my basement always because of the flashing light from the plow, but just appreciate it, because I mean, that was a big event, and it's crazy to think. I was in the motive of, because again, I shared with the, I was like in residency in a hotel and really had nowhere to go in the cities. I was like, let's go for 24 inches. Like, let's just go for it, right? So why not at that point, right? But again, I did come home and I was just like, oh, there's a lot of snow. Any issues, I know, like with storm drains today, or were there crews out?
Yeah, there's crews out punching the storm drains today, because that rain, that's, after you have a big storm like that, the last thing you want to see is rain. Because it floods the street. But by the time I saw it when I came to work this morning, but by the time I went home, it was all gone. So that was good. Probably the biggest challenge, I mean, other than they had to haul snow this weekend just to get it out of there, but probably the biggest challenge that they ran into was the highest amount of snowfall, like, it was like 2 inches per hour between 5 and 8 a.m. So they started at 2 a.m., and typically they'll get done at 6 a.m. was sort of their routes. Well, about the same time that they got done is when the intensity of the snow picked up. So they ended up they took a couple hours off, got a little bit of sleep, and then they came back in at 10 a.m. to redo what they had just did, because that was the most intense part of the snowstorm right then. So other than that, it went really well. So.
Good. On the topic of floods and rain, what is kind of early indications? I know there's a lot of moisture in there, but it melts slowly. I mean, are we hearing
So the
Thoughts
biggest,
on floods
so the
in the
biggest
river?
advantage we have this year is, well, there's
We had a
two
deficit.
advantages. We had a rainfall deficit, so there's lots of room in the soil for moisture. And the second thing is the ground never really froze. And so when it melts, it's going to absorb into the soil pretty quickly. But that's a lot of snow we just got. And it not only just happened here, it obviously happened across the entire Minnesota River floodplain.
Yeah, it was basically the
area.
swath of heavy snow.
Yeah, so, I mean, it definitely makes it a little bit more precarious, but I do think the no frost and the lack of rainfall is gonna help.
And then the last thing is I'm just gonna, shout out to the Chaska Police Department's Twitter account and just say Chaska's greater than Chanhassen. A little bit of a Twitter war out there today. And
again?
caught
Again?
that. Yeah. And I will comment that one person responded back that, where did Prince choose to live? And I felt like tweeting out, but when Prince is still alive, what council did he choose to announce his arrival back to, that he was still alive, which was Chaska. I don't think he went to the Chan Council, so I did not tweet that out. But I was very tempted just to say he might have chose to live there, but when he announced his arrival back and he was still alive, he chose to speak at the Chaska Council meeting. And with that fun humor, I will pass.
Good times.
hold a torch to that?
All right, Matt?
Two things, I did point out one of them in the bi-weekly. We'll have a closed session next week from 5:30 to 7 for my review. But we're also gonna have a closed session during the council meeting in relation to getting an update from our city attorney on our water and electric meter issues that we've been having. So, so just a little legal update on that side of it. So just so you know, going into the meeting next week. And then the second thing I was gonna point out, I had shared, well, I put in the MMPA's annual review, or annual report to sort of look at results, which for 2022, the year in review, I mean, MMPA really performed very well last year. And probably to top it off, getting up to 43% of our energy was from renewables by the end of the year, which is great. One of the things that I had shared with you before that was a real concern is this new energy bill that was approved, and it really has two standards that are, I mean, it's the right direction to go, but the timing on how to accomplish them is concerning. One of them is that we get to 80% renewable by 2030 and 100% renewable by 2040. And then going beyond that is that not only has to be renewable, but it also has to be carbon free. So carbon free by 80% by 2030, 100% by 2040. So the good news that occurred, I guess, late in that legislation was there was a recognition that the only entity that really can meet that carbon-free standard by 80% by 2030 is Xcel, because they have nuclear plants in place. There was a recognition of that at the end of the bill, and so what they did is they looked at what percentage of their energy was coming from nuclear, which is about 20%, and they actually reduced municipals and co-ops by 20%. So our requirement is going to be that we have to have 60% of our energy from carbon-free renewables by 2030, and then everybody has to be to 100% by 2040. However, the good news is, and we talked about this in our board meeting last week, we're well on our way to being 60% by 2030. That is not going to be an issue. The projects that we have in place right now are going to get us to that point. And in our strategic planning process, we've been targeting 2050 as a date that we'd have as 100% renewable. But we're going out and really sort of being aggressive and looking at projects that are out there that we think will be able to not only get us to that carbon free by 2040, but also keep us in a favorable cost position compared to Xcel, like we've always compared ourselves to. just based on sort of the technology we're going after, but also sort of the pricing that we're sort of building these deals around. So I came out of that meeting much more, I guess, relieved, hopeful. I mean, because again, like I said before, this is the right direction that we should be going, but we also we don't want to create a situation where you know, the solutions become so expensive that it becomes difficult to even afford to be able to do them. But I think from our agency perspective, we're really sort of in a good position to meet those goals, especially since that 60% requirement for 2030 was put in place.
Was there any relief on like emergency spikes for like winter storms, you know, things like that, or for challenges around like energy retention? Because you know, that's one of the biggest, you know, all of the non-carbon emissions, with the exception of nuclear, are spiky, right? You don't necessarily have it when you want it.
So there's a bill that's being proposed now that would require that a certain percentage of Minnesota's electricity be able to be stored by batteries. And so we're actually going to be supporting that as because that's really the direction we need to go. And if everybody has to do it, it puts everybody on the same footing. It's something that needs to happen if we're going to meet these goals, because if you're going to rely on just solar and wind, I mean, there's a real challenge in that, because if you can't store the energy, you're only going to be able to use it when it's in peak times. And so having a bill in place that would actually make the same requirements of everybody, and so in essence, everybody has to kick into this battery bank to be able to store a certain percentage of that energy that's out there to be able to deal with those issues like that. I think if we start going in that direction and start looking at that type of battery backup, and then having everybody sort of socially contribute towards it, I think that's going to start getting at some of the issues that we need to for that.
Is there money behind that, or is it just policy?
Well, it'll be policy, but it's the right time to have that policy, because there's the infrastructure bill that was just passed that basically extended a lot of the tax credit programs, which we've used to actually fund our wind projects. In essence, it sort of takes about 30% of the cost off of the projects because of the tax credits, because we can sell these tax credits and use the value of them to actually put towards our projects. And so so there's a lot of federal money out there right now. And so this, I guess if you were going to do it at any point, this is a good time to do it because of that money from the infrastructure bill that's out there.
There's an interesting article. The other benefit I've seen in the Minnesota's interesting article, because I think when I was reading about was, when you think of battery storage, we think of, like, as I'm staring at my battery, which is probably a lithium ion battery. But there's actually new technology that looks at storing and actually maybe better stored with iron. And you think of Iron Range in Minnesota as a place that could also be beneficial to Minnesota, because some of that early returns of that technology is actually showing that it's a better, it holds energy better. The other thing is that there is a appreciation for maybe where iron is located has higher standards. I mean, that is one of the things that the Green Initiative is driving. Places where cobalt, lithium, and all that are being openly mined aren't the greatest places in the world for, like, human rights and worker rights. And so there's a cost to that too. There's a world cost to increasing battery production. And so a lot of companies are seeing that too and looking for other ways, like other technologies that could be a battery versus what we consider now as the standard. Almost everything you think of has a lithium ion battery, right? But where those minerals tend to be in pretty rough countries and have pretty, a lack of maybe environmental standards and work standards, I'll say it that way, which is a cost. There's a cost to that as well. So yeah, I thought that was interesting when you talk about, like, battery storage, because I think it was just shortly after we talked that the Star Tribune had a big article about some promising technology and how it really supports the Iron Range and iron versus lithium ion.
Well, it isn't to suggest that this isn't going to be a challenge. It's definitely going to be a challenge, but I think the promising thing is that there is there's at least a pathway that you can see forward to being able to achieve these goals, but still do it in a way that we keep competitive electricity prices.
So, and the numbers, I mean, what we generate today, right? It's actually a really impressive number. I mean, I think in your staff, in the report, you mentioned it was like, well, technically, I think it's 1.2 trillion kilowatt hours, right?
Mhm.
And so that's not a small amount of energy. I mean,
No, it's like,
huge, right?
yeah, I mean, it's 43%. Not everything that we have as renewable, though, is carbon-free. So for instance, like we have our biodigester plant down in LeSueur.
Mhm.
That's sort of an interesting one because, you know, they take the potato peels from like Michael's Foods, or they take the corn silage from Green Giant and, you know, digest it, make gas, use the gas to run the turbine. Now, if those things were in a landfill, the landfills would just burn it off as excess methane. And so then you get methane into the air. So they're sort of a net carbon free. They're not adding any additional carbon into the atmosphere. And it's a way to burn those for a productive use of energy as opposed to just burning them off into the atmosphere.
Right. Makes sense.
And that's all I have.
All right.
Thanks.
Jake?
No report.
Okay. Marshall?
I can add a couple things if you'd like.
Go ahead.
The weekend of March 10th, the Curling and Event Center will be hosting our annual Brick City Bonspiel. So if you get a chance, go down there and check that out. And then Friday, February 17th, in the evening at the Chaska Community Center will be our indoor carnival.
March 17th.
March 17th, sorry. March 17th. Yeah. So all kinds of activities to enjoy if you're not going to go out for a green beverage that
That's the first year we've had it back since,
Yeah, since pre-COVID.
yeah.
Yep.
It's also the kick. I always considered that the kickoff to spring.
Yeah.
You know, whenever you had that, it meant that
It's
spring
fun.
is just about there.
Yeah,
I think I convinced my kids to go to that. I don't know. It's been a while.
yeah.
Those were fun days. I remember those.
Yeah.
Anything else?
That's it.
And Elise?
The only thing I had was in the Bike Weekly was just a quick memo on the rear entrance guidelines that the HPC approved earlier this month. And so you'll see come back to you at some point in time, some revised kind of guidelines related to the storefront loan improvement program. So obviously the name itself, I know we have some businesses who are excited to use these funds, so we'll be working on that and bringing a change back to you shortly.
Yeah, I think that one in particular, to me, was really exciting, because I think that it's so important to make sure that, two things, right? One is to make sure that businesses have the support to be able to, you know, weather the construction, right? But it also, you know, helps to pivot us towards the paseos too, because there's more parking, and we want people to recognize that, hey, where there's parking, you can get in the store. You don't have to walk all the way around to the front through the sidewalks, you know, to do that. And it's, you know, giving them the extra storefront, that rear-facing storefront helps to, you know, promote the paseos and use of the extra parking that's back there that will help to drive, you know, use of the parking, awareness of it. And so I think we're on the big scheme of things, that'll really help us as a community to help have more of that vibrancy that we want from that in our downtown, and to know that, you know, let, you know, our property owners and store owners know that we're really supporting them, we're trying to help them out as much as we can. So I think that's so important, you know. Thank you.
To me, the best example of that I've seen is down in St. Peter when they redid 169. So if you go down to some of their Main Street shops, you know, they really sort of focused on, they have their front entrance off the road, but they really focused on how did they create those rear entrances in the building to feel like they're part of the storefront. And quite frankly, it's a lot more comfortable, you know, to come in those back entrances where you're, you know, not greeted by traffic and all that kind of stuff. You can, you know, it's just casually park and be able to walk in, almost more like if you were going to, obviously not as big a parking as Target in those places, but having a parking lot that's dedicated to those businesses.
It does take a lot of stress, and it's kind of nice because they get the advantage of still having the advertisement on the front of the business, but they have something new and exciting for their patrons to kind of walk into on the backside.
absolutely. I think it's really, really, really important, so. Anything else?
Nope, that's it.
All right, I have a couple things. Just for an update I'm on the Suburban Transit Association. One of the things we've been doing is we had a legislative breakfast for a number of our electeds, and not just for our area, but for the broader Twin City, for all electeds who might be associated with transportation. And so we had a legislative breakfast there, had a really good turnout. We were able to meet with them, and it seems like there's a lot of support around microtransit, and which is really, really, really key for us. And it sounds like there's a pretty good opportunity for us because both the House and Senate transportation chairs seem to be very supportive of microtransit for both Minneapolis as well as for all of the regional providers, or with all of the suburban providers. So I think we're cautiously optimistic that we should be able to get something through this session that will provide ongoing and also some capital support for Southwest Transit, who's our provider. So that's something we're looking forward to. So that's really good, promising news. And also, this is kind of related to that. It's also thanks to all the continued work on the Paseos. I know that's that's been something that's been kind of a long project that's been kind of going on for quite some time. But that's so important to the walkability of downtown. We kind of talk about what it means to be able to have that vibrant downtown, and it's kind of laying down some of that brick and mortar that really helps it be the downtown that people want to go to. So it's not just like you're dodging cars trying to get in and out parking lots where things aren't well marked and it's not clear where can you walk, and having to be on a noisy street front on 41, but to really create these welcoming paseos where people can actually gather, walk, and actually go between places, and actually maybe even have some some sort of activities or side front cafes and things like that. So that would something that's really, really, really promising. So thank you for all your work on that. And thank you to Public Works for all of the work that they've been doing with snow. We talked about that a little bit earlier. They do such a great job, every year, when we have snow. And this particular one was kind of a doozy. Matt, as you mentioned, they had to go back to sleep and then get back up again, go do it again because Mother Nature just wasn't letting up. So, thank you to all the crews out there for all the work and having to get all that out there. So appreciate that. And certainly, also from that report, Matt, thank you for all the good news in City Square West in terms of some of that support we're getting from our representatives at the Capitol. I think we're hopeful that we can wrap up some of this and be able to lock up the funding we need to carry this forward. I mean, is this the last piece that we need, or is it?
Yeah, I mean it's the biggest.
Yeah.
You saw in there that we ended up increasing our request for funding because, the two big things that as we went back and sort of relooked at our pricing, inflation on property values and then also inflation on construction had a pretty big impact on that. I mean, it raised it by almost $10 million. So,
Yep.
So yeah, it's good to have those introduced. We'll try to get a hearing in the Senate. Our tour last year takes care of a requirement for a hearing in the House. They're just including all those in there that have had those. So we'll see.
Yep. Sounds good. Cross your fingers. This has been a project's been definitely another one that's a long time coming. At least I think some of the nuts and bolts has been at least 4 or 5 years working on this, and then there's a lot of the pre-planning goes all the way back to some of the downtown
Early 2000s.
Early 2000s.
Well, the master plan was the first time we really talked about it, and that was 2012.
I was
Oh,
I was
okay.
part of that one. Yeah. Yeah, and that one we really got the nuts and bolts. We had the number of community members from all around the community and downtown businesses and property owners, and that was a really, really constructive task force. So yeah, this is all the result of that. So just carrying those pieces forward. So as many things that occur in our world, and especially to some of the projects this size, there are things that happen over. I mean, it's 2012. This is 11 years later. We're just getting the pieces together for it. So
Yeah, this will be the second or third year that we've had a request for bonding. I will tell you that my experience has been 3 to 4 years is sort of when we did the interchange up there, we went up for 4 years straight. before we got it in there, and so, it takes time.
It does. You know, in my world, you know, because I'm in the technology world, it, you know, it feels like if it takes more than 24 hours, it's like, whoa, this is way too slow, right? And so, you know, then I come here in this role, it's like, wow, it took like 3 years. That was really fast. you know?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I kind of got like whiplash going between the two, but yeah, it's all good. I mean, let's keep at it. So that's all I have. Any other final things anyone have? All right, we have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Councilmember Hatfield,
Second.
second by Graw. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Oh, opposed? Motion carries. Motion, meeting adjourned.